advocating for Palestine, understand that we are advocating for Palestine and we mean it. That would be nice.
Scott, I mean, there's been some talk about this natural gas find off the shores of Gaza. It's quite a big project. It was brought up in the news years ago, and now again it's starting to come back into the headlines. Gaza's multi-billion-dollar gas field. I don't know if you know much about it or heard much about it, but this could possibly be a Chinese angle, if anything, if you know what I mean. Like,
well, it could be. I mean, there's a giant gas field off the coast, in the Eastern Mediterranean. And it's being divvied up by Egypt, by Cyprus. Turkey's trying to impose its will on that. But in the immediate thing, when you talk about Israel is is competing against two of their neighbors. One is Gaza, which has, if it was a sovereign state, a economic zone that it gets to develop. And it's you draw a line from the border out in the sea, it goes out to a certain distance, and that's their zone, economic exclusivity zone. Israel does the same thing. Israel almost got in a war with Hezbollah because Israel has drawn a line that sort of jotted up to take over part of the Lebanese claim, and Hezbollah went, we exist only to prevent you from stealing Lebanese land, so you're going to have to readjust that line. And guess what Israel did? They readjusted the line. But there's all that gas. It needs to be developed and exploited. One thing that no one's going to do is spend hundreds of billions of dollars to develop this. If their investment has a chance of going up literally in flames through a regional war. So China can talk about the kind of stability, and you attach money to it, gas development, etc. People start paying attention, and then B, it's in China's interest because if you develop it, maybe you want to bring in some Chinese, gas developers, and China can, has an economic. Every nation has a right to pursue its own thing. Who knows? But China, I think that is a player. But right now, for the Palestinians, it's just a faint dream because Israel will never let it happen because there is no Gaza, there is no West Bank, there is no Palestine. There's only Israel. So we need to change that reality. We need to make a Palestine that can advocate for its own economic interests and negotiate with whomever they want to negotiate to develop its resources. And China could be a player in that.
I really think that China is actually one of the only players that can rebuild an infrastructure on nations that have been torn apart. I mean, let's pivot over to Ukraine right now. I've asked this question a few times and you've answered it in detail on the show many times. Is that land that people have been fighting over, where everyone's at a standstill on the Russian side and the Ukraine side, and bombs going back and forth? I mean, it's torched land, it's mined land. I mean, is China one of the only nations that can rebuild something like this? Because we are talking, huge amounts of land. I mean, I saw an interview the other day where they were in the old steel factory walking through there and seeing that just completely bombed out. And the guys that were walking through, Lancaster and another guy running a channel there, said, this could be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I mean, it's just in a plant to rebuild it. So is China, and I think you're onto something here, is China one of the only nations that can really rebuild these nations that have been absolutely flattened by war?
Well, let's be clear that Russia will rebuild Russia. And they're not, I can't speak for the Russian government, but I take a look at what they've talked about, the priorities set forth by President Putin regarding the 4 new territories and Crimea. And he said that, rebuilding the economic and social infrastructure of these places, bringing it up to Russian standards is the top priority of his government. Now, if this conflict continues to a point where Russia assumes control over, some Russian leaders, Medvedev and others have insinuated that, Russia will probably take 5 more oblasts, 5 more territories. That's almost half of Ukraine. But Russia will assume responsibility for that. I think where China comes in is, in addition to being a economic partner with Russia, because by being a good partner with Russia, you empower the Russian economy to the point where it can feasibly divert billions of dollars worth of resources to rebuild these new territories. But Russia's not going to rebuild Ukraine per se. At least it won't be their top priority. And the West is abandoning Ukraine like a bad habit. Plus, Ukraine, I believe, whatever exists, will be under a period of Russian domination where denazification is a reality, and the West isn't going to invest into that. China might. China, might be willing to go in and extend the Belts and Roads Initiative into Ukraine, and I think Russia might be inclined to let them happen, because the last thing Russia needs is a Ukrainian cancer festering on its borders. Mm-hmm. When this war ends, Ukraine needs to be brought back into being a functional, a nation based upon logic, and China could be of assistance there, I believe. Again, I can't speak on behalf of Chinese politicians and what their priorities are, but again, I think they also agree that Ukraine can't be this infected mass just putrefying on the flank of Russia, that Ukraine will have to be healed. And China could play a role in that if China wanted to. As I said, I think Ukraine is going to be abandoned by the West, and it's not going to be Russia's top priority. Russia's top priority is Russia. But I don't think Russia would impede a nation like China, a friendly nation, coming in and helping rebuild Ukraine, so that as Russia rebuilds, Ukraine rebuilds, and at some point in time, you'll have two healthy nations that will have to figure out how to live in peace and harmony with each other.
I have a comment up on the screen here. U.S. wins in Argentina, the recent elections. Have you got any comments on that?
Well, it's definitely goes against the trend of what was happening. You saw what I'm interested in is what's Argentina's status with BRICS going forward, because they were one of the nations that signed on to join BRICS, and they're supposed to be brought in early next year. But a key aspect of BRICS is de-dollarization, and the new Argentinian president said no, he wants to re-dollarize the Argentine economy, and he's going down a path that runs counter to all of his neighbors and all of the global South. So, he will definitely be an outlier. Argentina will be an outlier. And now the question is America the economic ally that Argentina can rely upon? And all I would caution the Argentinians is that you're not the 51st state. You can wave the American flag as much as you want to. You can say all nice things about America all you want. Thank you very much. But you're not the 51st state, and you are so low on our list of priorities, it's not even funny. We got a whole bunch of things we got to do here at home. They're fighting over money for Ukraine and Israel, and I don't know what you think America's going to do, because the one thing we will do is punch you over to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And history shows that once they get their grips on an economy like Argentina, the conditions that they put on this money are very strict and very demanding, and the population just simply isn't going to put up with it. And I think that this president's not going to be around for very long.
That's interesting. I saw another comment the other day where people were saying, of countries in the European Union, where people were, really complaining. The Poles were saying, we'll let in certain refugees in the country, but we won't let other refugees. And somebody made a comment, well, when your country becomes destabilized, where are you going to run to? And it's quite interesting that, we have a lot of these countries that stand up and they, I'll use Canada for an example here. We've accepted a lot of refugees over the last couple of decades. But, when we get into trouble financially, where we can't house the people or find jobs. Now, over the last 20 years, the economy has been relatively solid, except 2008. When this economy war, blow up, I would say, it's going to really put the focus on how strong these governments are that can hold on to this. I mean, we are seeing